episode 1, we're in Alaska and it's December 17th, the last sunset of the year. As in, they have this winter dark period where the sun doesn't come up again for a while. We see a person with a hunting rifle. He's hunting moose, but suddenly the sun starts to set and the moose run off before he gets a chance to shoot one. They run off in a bit of a panic, and very often in TV shows and movies, I don't know if this is true in nature, animals are depicted as getting a little bit weird or jittery, as though this is some kind of omen or they sense something that's coming. At an Arctic research station called the Salal Station, we see researchers who are stationed there go about their tasks, working on data, and also doing their chores like laundry. One of the guys is settling in to watch some TV. Just then, one of the guys named Clark looks as though he might be having a seizure. When his colleague asks if he's okay, he turns around and he says, "She's awake." And then there's a power outage. 3 days later, on December 20th, a delivery truck arrives with the supplies that the guys had ordered from the nearby town. The delivery guy calls to the guys to help him offload their things and to sign for the delivery, but nobody answers. He goes into the facility then, looking around, and it's just empty. TV is playing, the uneaten popcorn is just there, and it's as though everybody left in a hurry or just vanished. Then he sees a severed tongue on the floor. I should mention, just in case this is relevant later, I don't know, that we do see a shadow of something whooshing by as the supply guy starts to inspect the place. It's a quick movement and we're obviously not meant to see or know what it is yet. It kind of reminds me of the way that vampires move in TV shows and movies. It's very fast and blurred, although I am fairly sure it's not a vampire. At a local crab factory, Detective Angie Navarro comes in and she's responding to a violent incident there. A man is out cold on the floor with a bloody nose and an older woman is helping a younger woman nearby who has a work-related injury. These two things are connected though, because the older lady admits that she was the one who hit the guy with a metal bucket. Turns out he was hitting the younger woman when they were in a relationship. So the younger woman moved out of her home and moved in with the older lady. And the guy didn't like that. Suddenly the guy comes to and he tries to go at them again, but Detective Navarro steps in, she stops him and she arrests him for assault and battery. As she's doing this, she gets a call. Jodie Foster's character, Detective Elizabeth, or Liz Danvers, arrives at the scene of the Salal Station with a colleague to start investigating the mystery and possible crime scene there. She talks to another one of the law enforcement guys there, Pete, who we later learn is her son, who pretty much tells Liz what we saw, that the supply guy found the place empty when he got there, and then the severed tongue. She gets him to check the funding of the place that has been operational for around 18 years. They do geological research and research into the impact of climate change. The missing men were researchers from all over the world, experts in different scientific disciplines. She also sees written on a whiteboard, "We're all dead." Although this isn't necessarily connected to these present events, we don't know. The men had all left their cell phones behind, but this also tracks with the seeming suddenness of their disappearance. They just vanished like it was the rapture. Liz wants to call in choppers and whatnot and get the investigation going, but her ex-partner, as in her ex-husband and Pete's father, Hank, thinks that it may be too soon for the families and they'll hear about it if they draw too much attention to the investigation too early. Liz points out that they're actually already late on the trail of this investigation. She knows because there's a sandwich on the table, and while the ham on it is still fresh, this signals nothing because cold cuts don't really go off fast. The mayo, though, is runny, and she says that mayo doesn't go runny until a few days out of the fridge. The clothes in the washer also smell, and she theorizes that the men have been gone for at least 48 hours. Then they get to inspecting the tongue, and she notices that it has marks on it, the kind that are made by repetitive behaviors like fixing fish nets with your tongue or something. This is a native woman's tongue, she says. It's not the first victim she's seen with a missing tongue. Somewhere else in the Arctic, a woman named Rose is preparing an animal for dinner when somebody named Travis shows up. He stands there looking scary, not saying anything, and she asks him what he wants. She does not seem pleased to see him. Liz gets a call from a parent about her daughter Leia getting into some kind of trouble. Turns out Leia and her girlfriend took an intimate video of themselves together. The other girl is 15, and Elizabeth thinks that Leia should have known better. Later in the show, Leia tells Liz, "You don't have to be my mom. My dad would have understood." So yeah, Leia seems to be Liz's stepdaughter. Angie greets a man named Ryan who asks her if she got a break in her case, her referring to the victim. Anyway, she goes over to Ryan's house to go over the case, and she asks if Annie, the victim, ever mentioned Salal, as in the research facility, and he says no. He tells her then that he loved his sister and he wishes that she were here, but it probably won't be a good thing to go through all of this with an investigation again. We also learn that Annie was having a rough go of things. She was protesting the mine, and the mine guys went after her at some point. Angie gets a call from Cooper then, who tells her that it happened again. She gets to an apartment and Cooper, who is also some kind of law enforcement, tells her of an incident where the occupant in the apartment was getting paranoid, and it's clear that this has happened before. Turns out it's Angie's sister Jules. She's having a mental health crisis, and when Angie suggests, in an indirect way, she go to the hospital, Jules refuses, saying that it was promised that she wouldn't be hospitalized again. At Liz's request, Pete goes over to his father's house and steals Annie's case files for her. Travis is still standing outside of Rose's house and staring at her. Eventually she goes out to him and he starts walking away from the house and she follows him. Pete brings the files over to his mom's house and we learn a little bit more about Annie's murder. Agent Navarro was the first person at the scene. Annie was stabbed 32 times and the murder weapon was never found. Annie also was found with her tongue missing. This is what potentially ties this case to the research station case. Liz is not very forthcoming with much else at first, but then she eventually does tell Pete that Agent Navarro was obsessed with the case and she was taken off it because she was bugging a lot of people and she got into fights with the miners. Liz also seems to know who killed Annie. She says Ennis. I thought that this was a person, but later in the episode, she announces herself and she goes, Ennis Police. So Ennis is the area, or perhaps she means that the Ennis Police killed her due to their inaction. I'm not sure, but she does say that the killer will never be found because of this. After getting some supplies, Angie, by coincidence, walks past the guy that she arrested earlier in the episode. He's bragging that his girlfriend will be back, and when she does come back, he will abuse her. She pours alcohol into the petrol tank of his car as an FU to him. Liz has a dream then, and in it, a child whispers mommy. She says Holden, and then the child says she's awake, just like the guy at the Salal station said before the blackout. Angie has a similar incident. She's driving and she's on a call asking for information about the Salal station, and just then we hear a voice that says she's awake. And suddenly she has to hit the brakes because there's a polar bear in the middle of the road and the polar bear is missing an eye. While she's working the case files for the Salal Station incident and Annie's case, Liz finally sees a connection. A coat that Annie was wearing seems to be the same one that one of the researchers, Raymond Clark, was wearing. Only Annie's had a tear, and in the one that Raymond was wearing, he had a smiley patch covering that same spot where the tear was. Presumably it was covering the tear. We don't really know that for sure, but it's fairly convincing. Travis and Rose get to a kind of clearing out in the snow, and he's barefoot and he starts performing some kind of spiritual interpretive dance, and then he points to something. Liz finds Angie at the facility, and I should mention that they are actually colleagues, but they don't really get along very well. They're not close. She tells Angie about the coat, and they go looking in Raymond's room. Angie says that she's never seen the guy before Raymond. He's not in any of their photos. I'm guessing that this is perhaps because she was taken off the case, or they hadn't established that potential connection at the time of Annie's death. And she also rightly calls out Liz for her horrible attitude. And yeah, Liz is a little bit disrespectful, she's dismissive, and she can be a little bit grumpy, but in a way that amuses her. She has some dark humor. Liz wants Angie to let the Annie murder go, but Angie says that the case isn't closed. And she describes just how brutal the murder was. Remember, she was the one who found Annie first. She says that the murder was filled with so much hate they'd even kicked her after they'd killed her and dumped her body. The girl was brutalized. Liz gets a call then. Somebody tells her that Rose found something out on the ice. Both she, Angie, and some others head out. When Rose tells Angie that Travis showed her, Angie says, well, Travis is dead. Rose says that she knows. Anyway, they get to the scene of what Rose wanted to show them, and it's the men trapped in ice, and it looks as though they were petrified, frozen, as though they were screaming or trying to protect themselves huddled together. They saw something for sure, but the big mystery is, how did they get frozen like that in action? And yeah, that is episode 1 of True Detective.